Thank you, Skip, and welcome. It's good to see you all. Did you turn it off?
I may have.
Thank you, Skip. Before introducing today's guests, I want to remind you that next month's meeting will be on April 27th, and it's titled Economic Spark or Environmental Clinker, Bellingham and the Cherry Point Coal Port, and will consist of a panel which will debate the pros and cons of building a very large cargo terminal and pier at Cherry Point for transshipment of coal, wheat, and potash to Asia and China in particular. SSA Marine, based in Seattle, founded coincidentally in 1948 in Bellingham as the Bellingham Stevedoring Company, is the world's largest cargo terminal operator, owns the land and is the developer, and recently signed a contract with Peabody Energy to annually buy 24 million metric tons of coal to be delivered to the new facility. Our panel will consist of Bob Waters, a vice president of SSA, Craig Cole, a hired spokesperson for the project, and Bob Ferris and Matt Krogh, both of Resources for Sustainable Communities. All the parties have informative websites, which you may want to check before our April 27th meeting. And we'll put this on our website as well, and in our notice to you, but it's gatewaypacificterminal.com, full of information. It's all one word, gatewaypacific.com, gatewaypacificterminal.com, resources.org, there's a hyphen between re and sources, and communitywisebellingham.org. So that's from next month, April 27th. Today, we are delighted to welcome back to the City Club our region's representative in the United States Congress, Mr. Rick Larsen. This is Rick's 4th visit to the club. And as such, Rick does not need an extensive introduction, at least from us. He's in his 6th term in Congress, which in these fervid political times is something he should be quite proud of. He serves on the House Armed Services Committee, the House Transportation and Infrastructure Committee, and the House Budget Committee. Earlier this year, he was elected by his colleagues to the position of ranking member of the Coast Guard and Maritime Subcommittee. He works very hard at his job, and we are very pleased to be that he's able to join us today. So, please join me in welcoming Rick back to the club. Thank you, Rick. Thanks for coming.
Thanks, Chuck. There's one change in biography. I'm no longer on the House Budget Committee, thankfully. However, still an issue. It is good to be back here. I think it's the 4th time. The first time, I think, was before I was elected.
Right.
There was a debate sponsored by City Club sometime in the year 2000 that I attended, and we used to stand over there where those tables are. So now we're up here. But it's good to be home. I've been back and forth already once from Washington, D.C. since Friday, because in this job, as you get along in this job, you're asked to do some other things, and I'm on the Armed Services Committee, as mentioned, and so I'm on a subcommittee that oversees the missile defense and military satellites and our nuclear weapons and nuclear non-proliferation programs. And so Monday there was a conference in D.C. on some of these issues, and I flew back to speak at that conference. And then flew back Monday night to continue my schedule here back home. And it's just a flavor of the job. One day you're doing budgets, the next day you're talking about Libya, the next day you're meeting with the Coast Guard, Bellingham Station. And so there's a big variety pack. That's how I describe this job. It's sort of like it's like going to Costco, the Good Northwest Company, going to Costco and buying one of those big variety boxes of Cheetos, where you've got barbecue Cheetos, regular Cheetos, nacho Cheetos, sour cream and onion Cheetos. That's what this job is like. It's like one big box of Cheetos. That is, you're doing something different every hour. Not every day, every hour. And so to talk about one aspect of the job today, I think will be very difficult. So I wanted to, we'll leave the variety pack to the questions, I think. I'll try to focus on a few things, but leave some things to questions. Just in terms of timing, how long, when are you done? When do I need to finish?
About 20 minutes for you, Rick, and then a few minutes for questions from me, and then we'll turn it back over to the group, and we'll be done by 1:25.
All right, so if I were to, okay, great, that's fine. I'll try to move along here. But there's one thing I want to focus on specifically, and that is the economic recovery. Because the debate in Congress right now, there's a lot of focus on budgets, and there should be, but to address budgets the size of your federal government's budget and the deficit, we need an economic recovery to take hold and to be part of that solution. So what I've been trying to do in this job over the last 10 years is to focus on various aspects of the economy here in the Pacific Northwest. And one thing that we're really pushing on over the next several years will be exports. And let me give a flavor of this. On the south end of this congressional district is a company called Boeing. Okay? And at Boeing, there are 14,000 people who work at Boeing who actually live in this district. There are another 13,000 who live in the 1st Congressional District, that's Linwood, Edmonds, South, Jay Inslee, Congressman Inslee's district, and about 15,000 who live in the 8th Congressional District, Bellevue area, Dave Reicher's district, and they're kind of split more between Renton and Everett. So I don't know the quick math on that, you all do it, and I'm kind of tired right now, but it's a lot of people, right? It's a lot of people. I understand there's about 200 or so Boeing employees that actually live in Whatcom County as well. So as far as a private employer in Whatcom County, Boeing's, 200 is nothing to stick at, right? In terms of a private employer. So Boeing doesn't need a lot of help when it comes to exports. They're a big company. It's a big company, and it has the capacity to hire people to be, for instance, in Australia, to try to sell to Air New Zealand and Qantas and some of the regional airlines in the South Pacific. They have that capacity. But a lot of our smaller companies in the Pacific Northwest don't have that capacity to reach out into the world, even though they want to. And some of these companies are already exporting that don't have capacity to build to expand that opportunity. So what we're trying to do, like to find solutions that work for us here in the Northwest. We're trying to do that out of this office right now, much like we do in outreach to veterans, much like we do in outreach to seniors. We're doing a lot of outreach now to small and medium-sized manufacturers who are in the export business, who want to get in the export business. And there are a lot of you out there. We're in our corner of the world, and I guess if I want to leave one message with you all today, is that I want people to think less about our corner and more about the world. Because we are connected out of Whatcom County, around the world through a variety of avenues, including our economic base here. Building things in Whatcom County, sending those things overseas while creating jobs here. It's happening every day in Whatcom County. And as I said, the Boeings of the world don't need as much help or attention as some of our small and medium-sized manufacturers do. So we have this export outreach program. We're trying to identify these manufacturers in our area and ask them if they need help, if they want help. And many of them don't even know this help is available. You're already paying my salary with your taxes. You're already paying Rafika Gafur's salary with your taxes. You're already paying the salary of the people who are at the Department of Commerce and the Foreign Commercial Service with your taxes, and the U.S. Trade Representative's Office with your taxes. You're already doing that. We should be returning that to you in the form of a service that's actually going to help our businesses in the area create jobs. And so what we've done is to look at all the resources, and the office we've done is look at all the resources that exist in the federal government and the state government and local resources like the Center for Economic Vitality, to try to become a hub of information to connect people, to connect businesses to other businesses, connect businesses who want to export to businesses who are already doing it locally, connecting businesses who want to export to the federal government resources that you're already paying for to help you get into new markets. And this is sort of taking a big idea that the president announced last year, this National Export Initiative, and trying to bring it home, trying to work it locally. And give you a few ideas of what we're doing and how this plays out a little bit. There's I'm sure you know, there's a company in Bellingham, Woodstone Ovens. Woodstone is not just a great export story, it's a great innovation story. They've managed to take aluminum and make stoves, which isn't a big deal, except that when you combine it with firing it with natural gas and some of the other magic fairy dust they sprinkle on it with the brains and research that they put into this, and almost replicate perfectly what it would be like to cook in a stone oven with wood. And because of this innovation, and because of the success of this type of oven, they've been able to sell this not just around the United States. Bertucci's is an Italian restaurant chain on the East Coast, and Bertucci's uses Woodstone ovens almost exclusively, right? Well, they also sell to a lot of places, including Osteria del Toro. It's a restaurant in Wellington, New Zealand, all right? And I was down in New Zealand and Australia a few weeks back. There's an op-ed in the Bellingham Herald about this trip. But the owner, Mike Egan, was in Chicago for a restaurant convention and hooked up with the folks from Woodstone. And they did their job to sell this idea of this great oven to him, and he's bought it and he loves it. And I got to bake a pizza and some pita bread down there in Wellington, New Zealand with a stove made by people working here in Bellingham, Washington. And so we have to, the idea here is that the market for a lot of these companies isn't Whatcom County. They're here because of the quality of life. They're here because because of transportation. They're here because of the workforce. But they're selling all over the world. Another example is Cascade Depot. They make braces, pediatric braces, for kids, obviously, for feet. And their market is all over the world. They've got a huge market in New Zealand. All American Marine in Bellingham on the waterfront. They obviously manufacture here and they sell a lot of places, but one of their suppliers is Hamilton Jets out of Christchurch, New Zealand. Another example of that connection. We also had a chance to talk to some companies who are seeking to get into the New Zealand and Australian market as well. So when I was down there, I was able to talk to our embassy people about these companies located in Whatcom and Skagit County, about how we can connect these companies with buyers or with distributors in these two countries to help them get in these markets so they think they have a good product that will sell down there. There's another example of this, though, that's taking place, and this is kind of the good side and the bad side of this. It's a company in Burlington that does re-engineered wood products. They basically take scrap wood, and again, I'm not an engineer. I just know these companies do this stuff, and people buy it, and that's good enough for me. What can I do to help, right? But they do re-engineered wood product. They take wood, they make trestles and joists, so that they're not cutting down new trees, they're taking old trees, taking old wood and doing this. And if you strip down the British Pavilion that was at the Shanghai Expo, World Expo, you strip it down just to its joists and to its studs and to the trestles. It's all made from this company in Burlington, Washington. The British Pavilion. That's a great story. The downside of the story is that you don't get the same conclusion if you strip down the U.S. Pavilion. So I'm still trying to figure that one out, and I will figure that one out. I will figure that one out. So what does all this mean for us in the Pacific Northwest? Ultimately, that exports do create jobs, and it's not theoretical. It's creating jobs right now in Whatcom County, right now in Skagit County, in Snohomish County, and it's not just tied to a big company like a Boeing or like a Microsoft. A lot of smaller companies, 50 to 200 people, who are actively, and even smaller than that, even smaller than 50, who are actively involved in an international market, and they're producing here and they're hiring here. And so this, I think, is there's always a growth opportunity because there's 307 million people in the United States according to the current census. There's 6.1 to 3 billion worldwide. Now, again, quick math on that shows the percentage of Americans relative to the world is really small. So in terms of a consumer market for companies in the U.S., yes, some of it's here in the U.S., a lot of it isn't. And so our efforts to try to get businesses connected with businesses in other countries is extremely important to creating jobs here in the United States and here in Washington State and here in our corner of the world. There's a couple of other things I want to point out about this, about jobs here in the Northwest. Back to Boeing. We are going to build, the Air Force is going to build a new air refueling tanker. And they're going to build it, thankfully, at Boeing. So the men and women at Boeing will be able to supply that tanker for the men and women in our military. I'm 45. I'll be 46 in June. And I know that sometimes I need replacement. These Air Force tankers are Eisenhower era tankers. That's quite a long time ago when we first started building these tankers. So we have to replace these. They're going to be replaced. And whether they're replaced by Airbus or Boeing, I'm sure the Air Force wanted the best deal. And I think they got and we believe they got the best deal in this with Boeing. And it's going to mean about 10,000 jobs in the Pacific Northwest, about a $700 million investment in the Pacific Northwest just to supply this new tanker to the Air Force. So that's a huge shot in the arm for the Pacific Northwest as well. And we can do that because we do have the Boeings of the world here in the Pacific Northwest. But in order to do all this, obviously we needed a really strong workforce. I met with the Northwest Development Council yesterday. Not all of them. I met with the president and the executive director. And they're focused obviously on working with the local employer base, and labor base to identify the high demand jobs. And here in Whatcom and Skagit, it's marine manufacturing, it's health and allied occupations, and we need to focus on that because that's a lot of education in the 2-year system. The 4-year system, we have some challenges there because of Pell Grant funding, which last year over 8,000 students in the area that I represent received Pell Grant funding from Western, from Skagit Valley Community, from Whatcom Community, from Bellingham Technical, from Everett Community College, about $38 million of Pell Grant funding just for students in this area to help them get to school, help them pay for school, help them prepare for maybe that job they want to get a technical education and move into the workforce, or prepare for something else through a 4-year degree. And it is absolutely critical in these, as we're dealing with tough budget times, that we maintain that investment in this foundational aspect of our economy, and that is in the education of our students. And we're going to have that challenge. We have a challenge at the state level, and I'll let legislators come here and talk to you about state level issues. At the federal level, the Pell Grant is the #1 source of federal funding for students going to college, whether it's a 2-year or 4-year. It's the #1 source of federal funding, and that you all provide through your taxes to help make that investment into our young people. And I think we need to continue to maintain the message to those young people that we are not going to forget them. We are not going to stop investing in young people in this country, because that is foundational to not just economic recovery, but economic growth and our competitiveness in this world. And so, but we do face some challenges at the national level because of budget issues. I want to just end with some comments on the budget. And I think that there's a couple ways to look at this, but I was talking to a group of community leaders this morning in Ferndale, and I actually did the math on the wall about the deficit. I can't do that here unless I've got an erasable marker. But to give you some numbers, and I'll go through this slowly if you want to write these down. The proposed 2012 budget, the fiscal year for the federal government, starts on October 1st. So for the next 12 months after that, 2012 budget is on the expense side is about, these are round numbers, $3.7 trillion. Okay. On the revenue side of the budget, it's about $2.6 trillion. So $1.1 trillion deficit. This year, the rest of the fiscal year 2011, which ends on September 30th, the proposed, where we are now with the budget is about $1.6 trillion deficit. So you're looking at a $500 billion drop, okay, decrease in the budget, in the budget deficit in 1 year. That's one number I want to put out for you. Another number I want you to think about when you're thinking about $1.1 trillion in deficit is around this debate that we're having in Congress, is that if you look at just, if you split the budget between, say, mandatory spending and discretionary, let me tell you what that means. Mandatory spending, obviously, is by law, you have to spend that money. That's Medicare, that's interest on the debt, that's Social Security, it's largely Medicaid, okay? So that's mandatory spending. On the discretionary side, that's, again, pretty simple to understand. That's money you don't have to spend. The law does not compel you to do that. You don't have to change what you do on the mandatory side, you have to change the law. To change what you do on the discretionary side, you just have to spend less, or more, or differently, or whatever it is, right? On that side, that's the defense budget, which would include Iraq and Afghanistan. That's transportation. That's education. That's some of the veterans programs, not all of them. It is EPA. It's EPA. It's any number of things. There's a long list. I'm sure everybody can point out. What about my program? Okay, your program too. It's in the description. The point is, if you add up the mandatory, it's about $2 trillion. About. These are round numbers. If you add up the discretionary, it's about $1.7 trillion to get $3.7 trillion, right? If your deficit is $1.1 trillion and you want to cut just out of the discretionary budget, right? For those in Congress who are saying we need to cut to get the budget to zero today, right? Okay, fine. You cut all these things. You know, cut NPR. I'm not suggesting you do. I see the camera's on. People are saying, you know, cut NPR, cut this, cut that, cut this. All right? Great. You'll be left with a discretionary budget of about $500 billion. My math is about right, right? Is that right?
Yes.
Yeah. Thank you. Right. 1.7 minus 1.1, about $600 billion. And a mandatory budget is still about $2 trillion. I will leave it to all of you to consider if that's what you want, if that's how you want to approach that. And then you can give me some feedback on my Facebook site, or tweet me, or email me, or write me a letter, and tell me if you think that's the right approach. Okay? I will tell you that we will not balance the budget by cutting NPR money. I'll be the first to tell you. I'll be the first to tell you that, well, I hope I won't be the first to tell you, that to address the budget deficit issue in this country is not as simple as many on TV are leading you to believe, or perhaps many of your neighbors are leading you to believe. there are a lot of moving parts of the budget, and frankly, there are a lot of interest, including in this room, from folks who don't want to see any of their stuff touched. I understand that. I get that. I also want to see the deficit come down, and I want to see our economic growth grow faster than what we're adding to the debt. If you do not do that, like a lot of countries, not a lot, many countries in the world, then you have an unsustainable financial model. There's just no two ways around it. So what I tell folks now is, if you think you can get away with just a hair trim instead of a full buzz cut, then you're a winner. You will be a winner in this budget environment. But to think that you can get increases, major increases, I think what the president, the president always gets some of what he wants, or in the future what she wants. He wants, higher education, money, investment in energy, clean energy, investment in some of that foundational stuff that really builds the foundation upon which you can build the house of economic growth on. The president, like any president, the president will get some of his priorities. But that will mean many other things get more than just a slight haircut. But that's where we are if in fact, and I think it's, and I'll end here, Chad, if in fact we do need to get on a path to decrease the deficit. Economic recovery will not close the deficit alone. This is not the case. The math does not play out that way. So it's going to mean over the next several years a lot of tough decisions, a lot of difficult decisions, and it's going to require a lot of straight talk from guys like me, but a lot of straight talk from folks like you, so that we get through this. And I guarantee you that when we get through this difficult budget time over the next several years, we will be a stronger country for it. We will be a stronger country for it. And we're a strong country now. But we've got to address this budget issue. Economic recovery won't do it all. It'll do some of it. We've got some other difficult choices to make. None of which I'm prepared to talk to you about today.
Well, we'll see how that goes. Thank you, Rick. Now, obviously, it's time for our questions, and I have a couple anyway. Much more locally, Rick, the Lummi Ferry. I'm sure you're delighted to talk about this. You recently stated that the ultimatum by the Lummi Nation issued to the county to terminate use of Gooseberry Point Ferry as of April 11th was unfortunate and unwise. In a letter to the BIA, Bureau of Indian Affairs, you also argued that agency urged them to get involved in order to resolve. What are you and the Washington congressional delegation doing in the next couple of weeks to help resolve this dispute?
Well, I think first off, the role that I can play, or the senators can play, really is a nudging role and nothing more than that. I think it's great news that the county and the tribes will be meeting tomorrow. We're scheduled all day. I'd expect that meeting to go beyond 5 o'clock, all day to continue the discussions on this. And I think that County Executive Kremen and chair of the Lummi Tribe are both committed to finding a positive solution to this. And the communities, whether they're on the island, in other parts of Whatcom County, or on the reservation, need to be vocal, but extremely supportive of the county and the tribes finding an amicable resolution to what is a very, obviously, turned into a very difficult negotiating environment. But I believe, after having spoken to both parties in the last 2 weeks back in D.C., that they're both committed to trying to find a solution to this. And I encourage them to continue to do that.
On a different topic, in early January of this year, your friend and colleague on the House Armed Services Committee, Gabriel Giffords, was shot in the head by a crazy man with a Glock 9 attached to a clip holding 31 bullets. As you well know, we all know, 19 people were shot, 6 of them fatally. including the federal judge. And then in January also there was a bipartisan coalition of mayors against illegal guns conducted a survey that showed that gun owners and most Americans strongly support a sensible approach to gun laws that protects the Second Amendment rights while also keeping criminals and other dangerous people from accessing firearms. So the question is what's Congress doing? Are they doing anything to ban clips of more than 10 bullets? Or to enact sensible limitations on handgun usage? And if not, why not?
Right now the Congress is not acting to go back to what the law was as of 2002, which was to limit magazines to 10 clips, or to 10 rounds, 10 round clips. I support going back to that law, and if you're asking though what Congress is going to do or not, you want the cold-hearted reality of the politics of Congress right now. The cold-hearted politics of Congress right now is that there's not a majority to do that. Not a majority in the House or probably the Senate to do that.
And why do you think that is?
I think, well, I'll finish my comment here. I want to reiterate, I think we can go back to that reasonable restriction, which was put in place in the 94 law that limited clips to 10 rounds. Why it is, I think City Club's doing a forum in May, and they're going to have a panel discussion on this and bring experts here to talk about that.
Oh, okay. You're not going to tell us why. All right. Let's talk about...
There's a lot of other great questions you want to ask.
Yeah, okay. Gateway Pacific. As you know...
There's a panel that on
that's next month. They're building the cargo terminal, or attempting to, or will. They're going through the permitting process now. They've done an excellent job in securing support from both local political and business leaders for this concept. On the other hand, some local citizens are concerned about the effects of 18-mile-and-a-half long coal trains passing along our waterfront on a daily basis will have on our environment and quality of life. Since these trains will pass through your entire district, do you share any of those concerns?
The first concern I share is that we need jobs. That's my first concern that I share with people. And I've already come out in support of this project. I think that the construction projects as well as the long-term projects for a bulk commodity facility at Cherry Point will be good for Whatcom County. The issue with regards to coal or any other commodity that is transported through the city, to the county, those issues ought to be addressed and are best addressed through the existing state and local and federal permitting processes. There's public comment periods, and folks will have their opportunities and many opportunities to make their choices and their voices known through that. And you ought to do that. But this is, I think that the issue of whether, we wouldn't be arguing this if it was wheat, probably, or some other commodity, but it happens to be coal now, and it seems to me it would be unfortunate if this is my personal view, it would be unfortunate if we didn't take the opportunity to establish a bulk commodity facility on the last remaining piece of land in Whatcom County to have something like this. Again, if it wasn't coal and it was wheat, we'd be laughing about it. But it happens to be coal, but it could be any other commodity, and there's a demand for it. And I understand that people don't like the fact that there's a demand for coal anyway, but there is a demand for it, and we have an opportunity to fulfill that demand and make some, using that state and local and federal permitting process to make your voices known, your choices known, and to advocate for appropriate measures to mitigate any problems the community has.
Thank you, Rick. And the last question I have, and then we'll turn it over to the audience. And Peter in the back and Skip here will be sharing or roving with the microphone. The last question, should Congress involve itself in the President's unilateral decision to bomb Libya?
You could reword the question so it's accurate, and then go from there.
Go ahead.
Well, I have, first off, I have problems with the president's approach to Congress on this. I don't think it was necessarily it wasn't a unilateral action. I think Iraq was a unilateral action. I don't think this is a unilateral action. The Arab League said they wanted a no-fly zone. The United Nations Security Council worked to get a resolution passed, doing something that I know many in my own party, and perhaps left of me, have been crying out for a president to do many times over, whether it's this one or the previous president. And he's done that, and there's still criticism of it. That being said, the White House did provide a briefing to congressional leaders on last Friday, but it was a limited number of folks, and it wasn't to all members of Congress. I think that when we get back, we ought to be immediately, and my guess is that we will. We're back on Tuesday. My guess is that we will be holding congressional hearings, probably starting Wednesday, dragging folks to Capitol Hill, whether it's in the House or the Senate, to ask some very specific questions. What is happening? When you say days, not weeks, administration, it's now been X number of days. We're starting to count into weeks. What does it mean to have our folks supporting other coalition forces to enforce a no-fly zone? Are we putting our folks in harm's way? How are you going to keep a promise to keep troops off the Libyan soil? And if you do not, how do you justify it? I frankly don't think there's any justification for troops on Libyan soil. My personal view on that. So I would argue it's not unilateral in the international sense. I think the president and the administration did things that other folks in my party have been calling for presidents to do when they take actions like this. It might be unilateral in terms of did he do it without congressional oversight, but I got to be honest with you. I don't think this falls into. I don't think this particular action falls into the constitutional definition of when Congress is to declare a war, because we're not declaring a war. We're not having a war with another country. We're trying to establish conditions for a no-fly zone, and when those are done, the idea is we'll be out. If that doesn't happen, the president has much more explaining to do to Congress and the American people about what's going on in Libya. Questions?
And now we'd like to turn it over to the audience. Anyone?
Here.
Oh, okay.
In the last 10 years, we've entered into 2 wars, and yet, as taxpayers, we aren't paying for them. Do you see a time coming when Congress will actually accept the responsibility that they have to do something about paying for what's got us into the situation that we are now? I think in any other time in history when this country went to war, people made sacrifices and they paid for it. And it seems to be the most ignored thing, and it was ignored by the previous administration, but it's continued to be ignored when Congress and the President agreed to reinstitute the tax breaks of 2002, which in my mind should not have been done for any segment of the population, and that would have been the fair thing to do. But do you see anyone back there, enough people, ready to be honest about the situation?
I know you didn't want to touch on that.
No, it's not a matter. It's a matter of rewording it in my head, actually. With regards to the tax cut compromise in December, the point I want to make on that is that I voted for it, but it wasn't because of the tax cuts, the extension of the tax cuts. there were a lot of things in there that were still helping the folks in the communities I get to represent, who are still hurt because of the recession that started in 2007. Unemployment benefit extension probably being the primary. And it could have been a expedient vote to vote no, knowing that it was going to pass, and I could feel good about myself about voting no on it. Even knowing that these folks would get help. On the other hand, I'd rather get credit for helping folks that are still hurt from this recession. So the economic, and in fact, most mainstream economists would say that, and I'll get to the other question, the other part of this question. Most mainstream economists would say that the economic growth part of that tax cut compromise had almost nothing to do with the extension of the tax cuts to the richest Americans. There's maybe some folks in this audience or other audiences in this county who disagree with that. And that's fine, they can disagree with me, but you know, they can also choose to disagree with folks who actually spend their lives looking at these things. So the extension of the tax cuts to the richest Americans isn't really what people are giving credit to for economic growth. It's for almost everything else in that package. And so that seemed as well something positive to vote for. Having said that, it's always great. It's never a good time to cut taxes on the rich because the economy's not good enough, and it's never a good time to cut taxes on the rich because the economy's going really well. That argument's over, and I hope next year, 2012, the presidential race is in part a discussion about the extension of these tax cuts on the richest Americans, because the economy will be in. I won't make a great prediction about it. It won't be 7%, but economic growth will be positive, and it'll be sustainable, and there'll be time to, move those tax rates for the top tiers back to what they were when the economy was growing at 5%.
But do you see the mood changing at all before then? I mean, do you see
No.
anybody understanding?
Everybody understands.
Like I do.
Well, everybody understands that we have a deep deficit problem. Everybody understands there's a lot of ways to close that. And there's a separate argument to be had about Iraq and Afghanistan, other than the financial, even though it's still pretty steep, about $150 billion a year or so. Just so we're clear, once you cut that, if you cut that to zero this year, you don't get to cut it to zero next year because it's done. It's cut. It's $150 billion and it's done. You can't cut $150 billion next year if it's zero. The point is you don't have to pay. That's right. You don't have to pay for it. That's right. But from a budget perspective, you only get to cut it once. And that's all. So 1.6 trillion minus 150 billion is $1.45 trillion.
But you won't make the deficit as much next year.
It's still, I'm not saying that 1.45 trillion isn't a lot of money, but the difference between 1.6 and 1.45, we still got a big deficit problem. My point, I'm sorry, I'm going to go to the next question. My point is on the budget is that for those who are looking for those types of things to cut the budget, to lower the deficit, it doesn't get you to where we need to be as a country. There's a good argument to be had about Iraq and Afghanistan, but to make an argument that that's going to cut your budget and get you to zero is just not the case. The math doesn't add up there. So it's a much deeper problem when it comes to the budget deficit.
Okay, next question.
Yeah, thank you very much for your clarity, Congressman. A recent speech by President Obama mentioned about 90% of our nation has some kind of broadband capability. He also stated that the other 10% of our people that don't have broadband or adequate service should not be left behind. The terms underserved and unserved were used to describe that 10%. Could you tell us what underserved and unserved mean? And do these terms include populations of both rural in urban communities here in Whatcom County?
Unserved and underserved areas in relation to broadband are communities that either do not have broadband access or have limited access to the affordability of services and transmission speeds less than 768 kilobytes per second as defined by the FCC, which affect both rural and urban communities alike. My district rural communities, such as those in East Whatcom County, do not have access to comparable broadband speeds to urban areas like Seattle. However, last year the Northwest Open Access Network, NOAA-NET, received a federal grant of $84 million to construct over 800 miles of fiber optic cable and electronics to provide high-capacity broadband access to communities throughout Washington State and the 2nd District, including Kendall Elementary School and the Nooksack Tribal School in the Mount Baker Foothills region. By the way, that was Recovery Act money. Don't thank me. This investment will be available to retail service providers to create new markets for business, rural citizens, and improve internet and broadband capabilities in the libraries, medical and education centers, government public safety agencies. And moving forward, broadband will help increase things like civic participation, community development, healthcare delivery, education, work and training, job creation, and economic growth in local communities. You should also know that there's a similar grant in East Snohomish County as well, where there's a partnership with, not Cascade Valley, Valley General Hospitals. So, in short, that is what unserved and underserved as defined by the FCC is, and what we're doing here to try to expand broadband into our rural areas. And I believe, if I'm not mistaken, we've put you in touch with the Mount Baker folks to discuss how you might be able to participate in that.
And that's the foothills area, bringing up it to high speed, as well as making it adequate enough for hybrid situations like Wi-Fi and stuff like that to come in. Where does it? How are we going to be able to make that last mile to those people? We have children coming back from school who can't do the homework because they don't have the capacity in their computers.
I'll take this 1 mile at a time. And this investment, this investment of your Recovery Act dollars with NOAA-NET into the Foothills region as well as East Snohomish County is a great first step.
Yep, over here.
Yeah, thank you for.
Oh, my God, sorry. Okay, sorry.
Thank you for coming. I want to thank you for allowing me to vote for you, because you seem to be and have shown a responsibility for your actions and for the country. Coming from Wisconsin, we're kind of, in my age, we're kind of proxmire, I'm trying to think of a word for it, proxmarize or something, but, you know, having won elections on $103 expenditures. But anyway, the point, the point is here, you know, the progressive state demand votes for all kinds of parties, but they also demand accountability. The talk in Wisconsin, particularly, about reduction of benefits, the medical and retirement benefits, or contributions they should make to it, would help bring things in balance. There might be long conversations on that, but the point is, they agreed to those kinds of things. Will Congress, and this would be a proximate question, will you have the same benefit kind of cut that other employees are going to have? How it takes, you know, I worked for 34 years as a teacher. I had to work 30 to get my retirement. I believe you're in a little different case before you get your full retirement, and those kinds of things. So when politicians want us to share, I mean, how do they go about sharing the same kind of thing? You're not going to work 30 years before you get yours due.
I'm not going to work 30 years before what?
You get your retirement or your medical benefits and that kind of thing.
It's up to you if I work for 30 years.
I'd be glad to vote for you. I'd be glad to vote for you. As I said before, I'm very pleased with your work. But you know, it's a different things, I suppose.
Yeah, no.
We kind of look at that.
Yeah, right. First thing is that, and look, I'm not, don't cry for me, Argentina, okay? Do not show pity for a member of Congress, any member of Congress. We choose to run, and we can choose not to run. So do not feel pity for us. So I want to say that because Congress has voted and has frozen its salary for the last 2 years, and I think, if I'm not mistaken, I'll double check this, into the next fiscal year as well. So, and again, I'm not looking for pity for that. That's a statement of fact. We don't have, despite what many people think, we don't have free health insurance. We never have. Well, I can't say that. I never have, and I've never asked for it. As a federal employee, we pay a little over about 28% of our premium, which compared to in the private sector where people are paying, it's about where the private market is about. It's going to differ from company to company, but generally it's about the same. So again, so I don't want to, I'm not saying this to say cry for me, I'm just telling you what it is. Okay. But we also have voted to freeze the pay of federal employees in this 2011 budget, and I think for the next, if I'm not mistaken, the 012 and 013 budgets as well will have that pay freeze in place for federal employees. We've instituted a pay-go rule, so if you want spending increases or tax cuts, they need to be paid for within the budget somehow. And if you don't, then at the end of the year, under the pay-go rule, sort of a scorecard created, and where there's a difference. If more has been spent than we have, then the pay-go rule allows the president to have a rescission, that is, cut other things to pay for those things that were not paid for. So that puts a damper on the spending. Same kind of rule that was in place in the 90s that assisted in getting to a surplus. So there are things in place, but again, it's certainly not enough. When the recession hit, that exacerbated what everybody knew. There were structural problems in the federal budget. And when the recession hit in late 2007, the economy goes down, tax revenue goes down for everybody, cities, counties, state, federal government. To recover from that isn't going to be fast, and the economic recovery, again, is not going to be big enough, strong enough. And we have to grow at like China growth rate levels, 8, 9%, to just have the economy close that deficit gap, and that's not going to happen.
Rick, we have time for one more question, if you're okay with it.
One more.
Hi, my name is Elaine Brent. I'm a retired colonel from the Army. But my question is just the one that's on the sheet. What are the chances of bipartisanship in the 112th Congress?
That's a great question. I got to say, you won't believe it. There was bipartisanship in the 111th Congress, and in the 110th, and 109th, and 108th, because I was elected to Congress. No. It's always there. I don't care what you read, I don't care what you see on TV, it's always there. It just is. And I think part of what happens is that the proliferation of cable news, for good or for evil, the proliferation of cable news and talk shows gives an outlet to anybody to say anything. And the 24-hour news cycle requires that these minutes, these seconds, need to be filled with something. And it's usually anything. So that exacerbates, I think, the perception and some of the reality that there is partisanship. But it doesn't do anything to highlight the bipartisanship that takes place. And there's quite a bit of bipartisanship that takes place. The work on the tanker was bipartisan. The work that I did last year to pass the bill that had to do with Alaska fishing was bipartisan. It wouldn't have happened without it. It would not have passed without Republicans and Democrats. Some of the things that we work on here in the state on transportation is bipartisan. Just because there's really big picture issues, financial reg reform, healthcare reform, the budget, some other things, and that's all anyone talks about. That's all the communication that comes out to folks, and it's focused on what do Democrats think, what do Republicans think. Doesn't mean it's not bipartisan taking place in Congress. You can't even get that stuff done without it. You can't get any of that stuff done without some level of bipartisanship. Maybe not in the final vote, but the thing about this job is that we negotiate in public, and that's ugly. For those who negotiate in private, tell me that it's perfect. Tell me that you don't yell at each other. Tell me that you don't walk away in a fit of pique, only to come back. Tell me you don't, because you can't. We have to negotiate in public for the public's good, with the public's approval or disapproval, and with the public good in mind. And it's messy. But this is a great country. And despite everything that Congress has been able to throw at the Constitution in the last 200 plus years, and despite all the bending and twisting that we have done in that document, and the abuse that it has had heaped upon it, it will still outlive all of us. Which is why we are a great country. Because we have that document that sets our direction. And we always, in the grand scheme of things, in the great arc, we will always get it right. It doesn't happen overnight sometimes. The civil rights era takes a while for some things, it takes a shorter time for other things. But we will always bend towards the rights and the freedoms that the Constitution provides and get these decisions right.
Clearly, the program committee got it right by having Rick here today. Just judging by how rapt you were, you're hanging on every word. And the last word is from us. This is a gift for Rick for coming. The book, Welcome Places To. This is our tradition. We want to please join me now and thank you again, Rick Larsen.